1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's go! Welcome to another episode of Fave 5 for Fans, the podcast where we explore all things favorite. I'm your host, Jamie Ray, and today I have Everett joining me for the first time ever to discuss our Fave 5 gun battles in cinema. Everett is a friend, companion, colleague of the Bram Stoker Award finalist, author, and editor Mark Sino. But we're not going to hold that against him. Welcome to the show, Everett.
Thanks, Jamie. Happy to be here.
Me too, man. This is an interesting choice for me. I do love a good gun battle, but I could like to hear what were your thoughts about doing this episode and what you did to make your list.
So obviously this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Obviously growing up watching action movies and then being a firearm instructor myself, there's always the very interesting elements you're considering when you're talking about movie gun battles, because we all understand that movie gun battles are far, far removed from any actual real life self-defense, lawful use of firearms, that type of stuff, which I spent a lot of time as an instructor and as a practicing attorney talking about. But what I wanted to go into here was a combination not only of what I personally love and have loved growing up watching movies, but also everything that I picked. I hope I can explain how it had some effect on like the broader gun culture in the United States,
Okay.
whether or not it's a catchphrase or a certain firearm that became ubiquitous because its appearance in that one movie changed the culture, both in fiction and in sales and the actual hobby of firearms. So that's kind of my overarching theme there is,
Right.
the role that movies have on the broader U.S. gun culture.
That's a lot. I just liked the things that went boom and
I got some of that.
didn't go pew pew. So we're going to talk about your instruction and your practice. By the way, how long does a lawyer have to practice before he can actually do it? I've always wondered.
We call it the practice. We never stop calling it practice because we're all
Oh,
practicing. Here's a secret. None of us actually know what we're doing. We're just trying real hard all the time to fake it. They say fake it till you make it, but
amen, brother.
Fake it until you fake it again forever.
There you go. Well, I am so excited. I've got my list down. I know you do. And
Right.
in, the storied history of people that are associated with Mark, I'm assuming you have like 20 honorable mentions.
I kept it to two, which I was
What?
I was under the impression those were the guidelines. I'm going to go off the rails a few times, I think. And one of my picks is kind of a multi-pick, but it's the same conversation. So I think it's in the spirit of the honorable mention that
Look
we
at you following the rules. Man, I'm telling you right now, you're coming back already. I like you. Well, all right. Well, we've got our list. We know what we're talking about. I say we go ahead and get started. Why don't you fire off with your
All right.
honorable mentions?
So, I spoke about my upcoming appearance on this with a couple of friends and colleagues, kind of ran some of my list by them. And I would always hear people saying, oh, you got to have this, you got to have that. And I think that both of my honorable mentions are on the honorable mention list, not necessarily because there's anything wrong with them and not because I don't love them as movies, but mostly because they're the types of things that are always going to be on everybody's lists.
Right.
And that's why I didn't want to put them on the main list because I feel like that's not unique to me. And, what fun is it if somebody comes on here and just rattles off the ones everyone expects, right?
Exactly.
But not that I don't have some expected movies, I think. But so number one honorable mention, this is where I, again, immediately go off the rails a little bit. I'm just going to say the entirety of the John Wick franchise.
Wow.
I know.
Okay.
So I couldn't pick John Wick for this for two reasons. One, how do you pick a gun battle from
I know.
from the John Wick series? The John Wick series is a series of movies, each of which is like a 2 hour long gun battle without interruption, which is what's great about them. Don't get me wrong, very entertaining films. But how are you going to say that scene?
Hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you one scene from John Wick. I can see it through my mind's eye of just like a blur of Keanu Reeves in all black with all black guns and all black scenery, just blasting everybody left and right. Um, but the reason it's on there and the reason I think it would be on most people's lists is because the as movies go, there's a lot of jokes in movies and in the gun culture about like Hollywood gun handling
Yeah.
and Hollywood shooting and guns that never run out of ammo and the revolver with 100 rounds in it and things like that. John Wick is kind of famous for being very realistic, as much as a realistic movie about a guy who basically can't be killed can be, but at least within the over the top action they tried very hard to put in like realistic gun handling techniques.
Uh-huh.
Keanu Reeves famously trained with Taran Tactical to like really learn what he was doing. Even though it was all fake in the movie, there's all these videos of Keanu Reeves. I almost call him John Wick because he's like so associated with that now. But there's all these videos of Keanu Reeves like running, three gun competition stages and stuff to learn how to look like he's doing this right. And so,
Right.
the movie did it well because it had like real techniques while still being completely batshit nuts. And so that's great. So yeah, that's I hate to put it there because you know everybody's going to disagree with that one. But you know what? Come at
Doesn't
me. I
matter. It's
disagree
your
with people
favorites.
for a living.
But
So that's my first honorable mention right there.
I am going to put you on the spot, and I am going to ask you to pick one scene. Doesn't have to be your favorite, but what's the first thing that pops out into your mind?
Man, honestly, the scene that most resonates with me from the movie isn't even one of the gun battles.
Oh
It's
yeah.
the one that sticks in my mind most of all is when, he goes down to his basement and just starts sledgehammering the ground. And then he
Yes.
pulls out his weird case of guns and gold coins, like or
Yeah.
whatever, like the strange in-universe currency of the secret society of assassins.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's like that tipping point where he arms himself after he's like very, very on the nose, like not just metaphorically, but literally buried his past under the
Exactly.
slab. And then he just gets those guns out. And then it's 0 to 60 in a second after that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
That
so
is a
like
great scene.
yeah, that scene, that scene was just it was awesome.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, I'm glad I forced you. You got another honorable mention.
Yes. So same reasoning. This is on everybody's list. Everybody who's ever going to think about somebody this is going to put this on there. And I got a
Yeah.
couple of reasons. I don't want to retread the same exact water, but the second honorable mention has got to be Heat.
Oh yeah. That's on everybody's list.
It's on everybody's list because again, it was one of the earlier films that really did realism well in a gunfight scene. So everybody obviously has seen the iconic bank robbery gunfight with the, properly executed military tactics and speed reloads and stuff like that. And it's one of those things that because it's going to be on everybody's list, it can't be on mine because I wouldn't feel like a special snowflake. Uh,
Yeah.
and and
You're
also,
special to me.
look, true confession, I like the movie. I've seen it like once or twice, and it's
Mhm.
been a long time. So I'm not going to put a movie that I don't have on DVD sitting
Right.
there. I like the movie. I've seen the movie. I recognize the contribution again to the broader gun culture and everything, like my original theme. But I did a little bit of research on that movie just to make sure that I wasn't erring too badly by not including it on the list. And
Mhm.
there's like some lore about the bank robbery gun battle scene in that movie being used in actual military training. And whether or not that's 100% true, they did get an ex-British Special Forces guy to help coordinate the scene. And they say that in various military training classes that they've had, and I think every different instructor is kind of allowed to do what they want to do. I've never been in the military, so I really can't opine too much. But some people are supposedly have showed clips from this to show certain tactics and how they should be done. Or even there's allegedly somebody who said, if you can't reload as fast as Val Kilmer, you got to get out of my army, something like that. So yeah, and that's a director, Michael Mann, who is like really well known for trying to keep with accuracy. So like the subtitle to the honorable mention from Heat is there's one scene in the movie Collateral by the same director.
Oh
Where,
yeah,
yeah,
Tom
where
Cruise.
yeah, Tom Cruise does, peak 90s era close quarter combat stuff with like the tactical speed rock where he draws out of his holster and engages the two guys at close range with like Mozambique drills, I think. It's all very precise. Top of the line close quarter battle stuff for its time period. Those techniques nowadays are a little bit dated looking, but
Yeah.
still, you can see how they could be effective when done right.
They'd still work on me, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Uh, I have to agree with you because when I went to make my list, I talked to a whole bunch of people that I respected their opinion. The first of which was my brother, who he was in the Marines, so you can't say he's a former Marine. He's still a Marine, but he then got into the LAPD and worked his way up, got into SWAT, and then became a sniper for SWAT. And so Heat is probably one of his favorites of all time. And again, he talks about as much as you're going to get in Hollywood, it's pretty doggone accurate.
Yeah.
He's actually been technical advisor on some shows before, and that's the main thing is that sometimes you're going to tell him this is what you're supposed to do, and the director's going to be yeah, but that doesn't look good. So there's always that grain of what's right and what looks cool.
Yeah.
So
So yeah,
that's great choices though. I
yeah,
like them.
that's my two. I hope I don't upset anyone too much. That I'm not going to talk more about their favorite movies, but they're allowed to love them as much as they want and put them on their own list. I hope that I have some interesting comments on my actual list here in a second.
You already are. So well, I have two honorable mentions, and I will say that all of my picks are just because they're fun. I'm not necessarily worried about the accuracy of it, even the feasibility of it. But if I had to take out lasers and I had to take out phasers, I figured it needed to be fun. So some of these are going to be straight up just gun battles. But also there's going to be like what you were talking about, close quarter stuff, maybe running out and having to pick something else up and use it. But my first one is a true gun battle. As long as you can pick guns and rocket launchers that fit into guitar cases, because I am talking about the Battle of the Three Mariachis in Robert Rodriguez's Desperado.
Hmm.
Now, have you ever seen this movie?
Yeah,
Okay.
and
I
spoiler, I may
understand.
mention it.
Yeah. I understand it doesn't make a lot of sense. Trust me, I get it. But it is so much fun. And I watched it again in preparation to this, thinking, man, I saw that back in the mid 90s, and all I could remember is Salma. So I went back and
Her breakout role.
rewatched it again, and it was just as fun. And the other part of it that makes it so cool is that the two of those mariachis were two of them from his first movie, El Mariachi, the one that he made on his credit cards and, you know, borrowing money from stuff people. So it was really cool that those two guys show up again. And you've got the one guy that's got the two guitar cases that like has a machine gun in it, and then the other guy has the guitar case that he puts up over his shoulder and shoots off rockets. And then Antonio Banderas just has some really pretty silver guns, and he jumps all over the place. So it's a lot of fun. Is it true, real to life? No, no. But we have enough true to life that I don't need more of that. I can just
Mhm,
enjoy the show.
mhm, mhm.
So that's my first one.
All right.
My other one is also a very tongue-in-cheek. Hard to believe it could really happen, but damn, don't it look cool? And I'm talking about the very end of Kick-Ass
Mm.
with Hit Girl's attack on the mafioso to the tune of Bad Reputation. um, to see this young girl who is just such a total ninja. I mean, she starts off throwing knives and shooting guys and picking up other weapons and using them. And she uses her size to her advantage, which most of the time you're thinking you're using like a big guy so he can throw people around. Well, she does it because she can jump all around and she's an excellent shot as well. Could a 12, 14-year-old girl really do that? I don't know, but it looked cool with the leather cape flying in the back.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And honestly, that is one of those movies. I remember watching that movie in the theaters when it was new.
Uh-huh.
And despite the unrealism of it, I remember loving that movie. I just thought it was so much fun. But it's weird though, because it's one of those films that I watched and I was like, this movie was great. And I don't think I ever watched it again.
Yeah. Well,
Which is a shame because like I enjoyed it so much. Even if sometimes unrealism and like we'll see in my list. It's not all realism. The realism was on the honorable mentions for a reason.
okay.
We're gonna get wacky, I think, with some of them. But uh,
Why?
but yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that. Like that was a really fun movie. It did over the top well. I felt like it was similar in both time and theme to was the movie Wanted, I think, but it didn't.
Yeah.
That one I felt was just a little bit too silly with over the top, bullet curving type of stuff
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
to the point where it worked against the movie being fun because it was just a little too hard to suspend the disbelief there.
So it's funny that you bring that movie up because it was on my very short list. Um, but I would have brought it up simply to say this is what you shouldn't do with a comic book adaptation.
Yeah.
If you've ever read it, it's a great story. But in it, Wesley is pretty much the same character, but it's a world of superheroes
Hmm.
and villains. And several years before the movie, all of the supervillains got together and basically used their magicians and used their sorcerers, and they wiped out the superheroes, and now all of the world is broken up and run by the bad guys. And Fox and those people who wear that little pin on them,
Hmm.
it is basically hypnotizes people to not see them, so they can do all of this bad stuff and just walk out, and nobody ever notices it.
I see.
Plus, there's some incredible things like basically the Batman and Robin character, and of course they don't call him that. They mind wipe them and convince them that they are actors, Adam West and Burt Ward, and they're in a bad TV show. So there's
That's
tons
awesome.
more things that I can't talk about on a family show, even though we're talking about guns on a family show. Yeah, I'll tell you. One of the ways they get this Superman is with a kryptonite condom. So if you ever had a chance to read it, it's great. But throughout the bullet and the wings, clipping the wings off of the fly are in that comic. So it's a good read. And
Yeah, I
again,
feel like I remember when the movie came out, I had friends who were fans of the graphic novel that were a bit let down by
yeah.
the movie. Yeah.
If there wasn't, and that's so many of them, if there wasn't something before, it would have been a pretty enjoyable, over the top type of film.
Yeah.
But knowing how awesome the comics were, it would have made a great like cartoon series on Max now
Yeah.
type deal. But anyway, so that's enough of the things that I didn't choose. I want to know what you did choose
All
for your
right.
five.
So getting into the number five, I think unfortunately we might sound a little bit repetitive, but the number five, Desperado, with
Really?
yeah, and
Really?
specifically the same scene that town shootout with the three mariachis at
It's
the
a
end.
match.
Yeah, absolutely. High five on that one. But yeah, so look, in creating my list, like I said earlier, I wanted to tie things together. I'm hoping that when we get to my number one, we can do a retrospective on
Okay.
all my other picks and see echoes of the past in even though that movie kind of my number one came before a lot of these, still it's there's common themes that tie them together in this intricate
Right.
web we have here. But that movie is something that I remember from my childhood. I felt like it came on TV all the time.
Oh,
When
really?
I mean, look, I was 9 when it came out. It came out in
Oh,
1995. So and I was born in 1986. So I'm a 9-year-old kid. So as soon as that's coming on TV, I'm what, like 10 years old.
yeah.
And that's one of those movies that when it would come on TV and I was at my dad's house, for example, like we'd stop and we'd watch it, no matter what, when that
Oh,
movie came
cool.
on, because that movie is awesome. Is it stupid? Is it unrealistic? Absolutely. But it's got the kind of unrealism that it's just so charming. You have to love it. So to me, I went back and I watched. I didn't watch the whole movie in anticipation of this, but I went back and watched the scenes that I was going to pick.
Like the
Um,
bar scene.
yeah, the bar scene in the beginning and the shootout at the end. Like it's between those two. And I watched both scenes again in detail. And I had to give it to the one with the machine gun guitar cases and rocket launcher guitar case. There's just
You
something over the top that is so fun. When
so
you
fun.
watch this whole movie with all these great action scenes, and then he shows up with his buds, and they just also have guitar cases, and you think they're just going to pull guns out of them, but no, the
Yeah,
cases are the guns, right? And
exactly.
it's just it's crazy, and like the guy with the rocket launcher guitar case, like doing a split every time he fires it, like that's a
Yes.
better position to stand in, but it looked slick. It was
So
awesome,
cool.
and yeah, of course, everybody loved that. But so that's the scene. But going back to the other scenes, like from earlier in the movie, there are little, I want to say maybe not intentional, but Easter eggs when he first opens up that guitar case in that first scene where you find out the guitar case is full of guns. There's
Yeah.
some interesting guns in that
Oh,
case.
really?
Absolutely, which I'll talk about in some more detail. And if you go like on the Internet Movie Firearm Database, there's like a website with all the guns used in films. Man, they got some weird picks. And it was almost like they went into the prop department and said, get all the coolest looking guns we can find. It doesn't matter if they're completely ridiculous. And they are. There's
Yeah.
in that first scene in the bar, everybody's just sitting at the bar, whatever, hanging out. And then he starts shooting, and they all pull out like full size suppressed MAC
Where,
10s from
where were
where?
those?
Yeah, it's like, is that down your pants? Like huge. And just pull that stuff out. And they're shooting. And so it's like if you picked just like what's the coolest looking stuff we could find in the prop department in the mid 90s, it's mostly stuff that was cutting edge in the 80s.
Yeah.
And just like, yeah, and honestly, the main two guns that Antonio Banderas uses were relatively like inexpensive as Ruger P90s. And that's like, kind of an affordable line of pistols at the time. And it's all been long discontinued at this point. But like, yeah, they definitely had, I think they were also featured, I think in like True Lies, those same
Oh, okay.
pistols. But the point is you watch that and you see guns there's movie guns in that movie.
Yeah.
All the guns in that movie are movie guns. And I think that's why it has to be on the list because it is kind of, in a sense, an ode to a lot of the other picks from the list
Hmm.
because just those use of those like cool looking for the aesthetic,
Yeah.
over the top aesthetic of, a bad gang of bad dudes with their ridiculous guns that they're going to run around, cause some problems with, and then, your equally ridiculous main character is getting even. So yeah, absolutely rule of cool doesn't have to make sense because the lack of sense does not interfere with how
No.
cool it is. And in that early scene, Quentin Tarantino is in that movie. And so you see a lot of echoes of Tarantino-esque gunfights that he had done before and that he would do in the future.
Right.
So there's clearly a lot of, shared love in that movie for that type of over-the-top action sequence. And so yeah, that's why that's my number five. But
That's
it's number five because I don't feel like it specifically was as influential on other stuff like my other picks will be.
okay. And Salma.
Mm, yeah, early peak Selma, absolutely.
Well, number five on my list is the library battle in 2021's Gunpowder Milkshake. Now,
Okay,
this is yeah. Okay. Have you
I've seen
seen
it.
this one?
I have seen it. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a star-studded movie that features Karen Gillan as a young hit woman who must join forces with her estranged mother, played by the fierce Lena Headey from Game of Thrones, to protect a young girl from rival assassins sent by the vengeful father of the man that she killed at the beginning of the film, which is pretty interesting. And all of these bad guys are sent after her by the head of the HR department of the firm, played by Paul Giamatti. But the scene that I'm talking about specifically is when all of the bad guys have finally followed the three ladies into at the door of what is commonly referred to as the library. And so they have shown up earlier, the girls, to see if they can get some weapons. And so you're sitting here, and then the librarians come out, who are three of her former colleagues, played by Carla Gugino, Michelle Yeoh, and Angela Bassett. And it's fun because they go in and they're like, okay, well, you're going to need a little Alice in Wonderland, and you're going to need an Old Man in the Sea. And you're like, what? And then they go and start pulling these books off the shelves, and they open up and they all have guns in them. And then the guys, when they come in, then it's just a no holds bar, slinging lead from left to right. You got a battle of bevies of beauties with guns, hammers, chains, hatchets, and even a Vulcan gun in a Volkswagen minivan, all set to the tune of Janis Joplin's Take a Little Piece of My Heart. This scene was so over the top, and I love every second of it.
Yeah. You know, I remember watching that movie, and it definitely had its highlights. My only real complaint about it, and I remember, I think I watched this with my wife, and we had the same comments at the end, is that it felt like everything that it succeeded at doing was a little bit derivative of recent movies in the same genre, a la John Wick and stuff like that, you know? And that was really the only thing that I think kept it from being as good as it could have been. But yeah,
Yeah,
it was definitely that was, I want to say, the strongest scene, because you get in there, you've got, you know, these, like you said, these star-studded cast that shows up there, and you know, it lets you feel like you've stepped into something. Like, you know, there's the dynasty of you know, gunslinger girls here, and
yeah,
yeah, I do think that was the strongest scene in the movie.
yeah. And I love Carla there at the end with her little white lace top tied up and her sweater just tearing it up, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of fun, a lot of fun. Maybe, yeah, I will agree with you. It's not the best movie. Yeah, it takes some other things into hand, but I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, well,
And
we're not picking best movies here.
nope,
You know, we're picking best gun battles in movies. So, you know,
that's
you
right.
can't argue with that.
Yeah. So that brings up the point, Everett. I'm interested to find out what your number four is.
So my number four, I think, will be familiar to everybody. But number four, as my colleague James Reeves calls it on his YouTube channel, the controversy slot. It's not without its, you know, its controversy here, because I think you could argue that this isn't a gun battle, because
Okay.
despite the sheer number of rounds expended on screen, no one is shooting back. And it's the scene in one of my favorite movies of all time, Predator, where
Oh,
they all just shoot at the forest and
yes.
down all the trees. And first of all, just this scene is awesome. And I
Yeah.
remember being a kid when I first saw this
Two
movie.
governors. Two
Yeah,
governors.
two governors. But I also remember watching that and being like, this is just the coolest.
Yeah.
It's just, it sets the tone for the movie so well, like where you're at with the movie. Like, these ultra tough, super muscle bound dudes are scared, you
Yeah.
know, and they're just shooting the trees until they run out of ammo.
Yeah.
So, yes, awesome scene in an awesome
Awesome.
movie. Predator technically is not shooting back, but,
Yeah.
you know, they do wound it, you know. So if
We
it
will
bleeds,
allow it.
yeah. But one of the main reasons for inclusion on the list, back to my theme of influence on the culture, so Jesse the Body Ventura is carrying the man portable M134 minigun,
Yes.
which became so iconic. That's the first time that appeared. That's the
Oh,
first time in a movie that there's a man portable minigun that shows up.
yeah.
Now, that is not a real thing that exists.
No.
Absolutely no way that a person could actually handle that. You know, if you read up on this, it's a prop that even with blanks, it was difficult. They had to throttle down the possible rate of fire. And they also had to power it with a separate engine to power the thing. Because normally this is a mounted gun
Uh,
on, vehicles, aircraft, etc. So
or VW minivans.
yeah, exactly. So, but the reason it's on the list, again, it shows up. The minigun shows up in so many movies after this.
Yeah.
Now, in some movies, it's attached to a vehicle like it's supposed to be, but in many other movies, somebody's holding it.
Right.
Terminator 2, for example. Terminator 2, Arnold's holding it. Fun fact I learned when researching my things here, it's the same one, the specifically
Really?
same prop. Yes,
Wow.
same exact gun from Predator is used in Terminator 2 for that scene.
That is
So I
cool.
thought that was really cool. But yeah,
Yeah.
the whole thing is super faked because practically speaking, if you held on to that thing, you would use all the ammo you could physically carry in 2 seconds.
Oh,
And that would be it. You carry that giant thing for like 2 seconds of sustained fire. I think that actual gun shoots 2,000 rounds a minute or something like that. It's an absurd, maybe even faster than that. I can't even remember. I should have looked that up, but it's nuts.
yeah.
And not only that, but it requires an electric motor to run. It's actually, I think, made by General Electric. And so
General Electric.
apparently in the movie, you can see a power cord that
Oh,
runs on the screen
really?
to run the thing, and that's to run it at a reduced rate of fire. And they have made at other points. I think they call it a microgun instead of a minigun that is in a smaller caliber that is theoretically controllable by a person, and then you can actually carry the ammo, which weighs a lot less for the smaller 5.56 standard
Mhm.
round that they use in the military for your standard assault rifles these days. Um, but yeah, the pack. This is something that I looked up. The pack in the movie held all of 4 seconds worth of ammo and no batteries. So there was nothing he was carrying on himself. Even if he had magical powers to run the motor on the thing, there was only 4 seconds of ammo he could even fit. Uh,
Wow.
so yeah, it's completely nuts. But because of that scene, that gun shows up again in Terminator 2, and the man portal minigun shows up later in so many movies and video games specifically. That has become such a
Duke Nukem.
ubiquitous gun in video games, whether it's, just going back to early Doom
Yeah.
to, Fallout and all these huge video game franchises where this has been an iconic gun. So again, that is completely made up. People with really no clue made that thing up for a movie because it looked awesome. And
Exactly. It looked
They were
awesome.
right because they stamped the culture with this man portable minigun with Jesse Ventura in a way that will never be free of it, no matter how unrealistic it is. It's still amazing,
Yeah.
and I'm here for it.
They even made a Nerf gun like it.
Yeah, yeah. So that's absolutely my number four. Maybe a controversial pick for a gun
No,
battle, but
I
you got
love it.
you got
I
to
love
love
it. The jungle doesn't fight back. Well,
it.
cool. All right. Well, coming in at number 4 is from Luc Besson's Leon the Professional, specifically talking about the epic building battle at the end. So,
Absolutely.
Leon is a skilled cleaner for a
Hmm.
powerful mobster in New York City, living in the same building as little Natalie Portman's Matilda. As some corrupt DE agents break in and end up murdering her entire family, Leon takes her in and he ends up, over the course of time, training her in his work. Because, that's what you do.
Hmm.
Um, but my favorite scene occurs at the very end, where Matilda has gone to the store, and as she comes back, she's ambushed by the ESU team that's led by the horrible Stansfield, who's played once again. I mean, this guy is the man of a thousand faces. It's um, Gary Oldman. Sorry. So he has all of these guys and they are trying to get him to come out. But of course, he knows what's going on. So they start throwing bullets down the hallway. They're throwing, grenades, all of this stuff. And Leon is just kind of like hanging out up there, waiting for it to all die down. And then when he starts returning the fire, I mean, he's hitting everything he shoots. Um, I really, really enjoyed this fight because he was so cool in it. He was a professional.
Yeah.
He didn't get angry. He didn't get, scared or pumped up. He just sat there and he did exactly, and he kept the fern. So,
Yeah.
it's pretty awesome. And the way that it ends is just so cool. He ends up getting a costume, not a costume, a uniform from one of the first responders, and he makes his way out in that. But the Gary Oldman character sees him and shoots him in the back. But as Gary Oldman comes up to him, he turns around and hands him a couple of pins from the grenades, all in his vest, and
Yeah.
they blow up together.
This is from Matilda.
Yes,
Look,
exactly.
I gotta say, look, I didn't put that on my list,
Uh-huh.
and it was super hard to not put it on my
Oh,
list. And the reason it was going to be on the list, I promise you it was going to be on the list, but I felt like it was, I blew my load on that one too early. All right. You met my son. You remember my son's name? Leon?
yeah, yeah.
No joke. My
You're
wife and
serious.
my wife and I both love that movie. We
Oh,
actually watched it
wow.
recently. One of my favorite movies of all time. Again, couldn't put it on the list because as much as I love it, I couldn't pick one single battle
Oh,
that I
yeah.
felt like would go on the list. Your pick is the right pick on that movie, 100%. I love that movie. We have a little like a little fan art on the wall from that movie in the other
Oh,
room
really?
where I'm sitting right now. Yeah,
That is so
I might pull
cool.
up a wall later on just to show you. But look, that is a great pick. I love that movie so much. Uh, yeah, I mean,
And
unironically, my kid is named Leon after the movie
that is
because we like sort of
amazing.
short, classic sounding names.
Yeah.
But yeah, that movie is so good. Just don't look up the one that Luc Besson wanted to make because that dude was weird. You
Oh,
know?
yeah. Now,
Yeah,
you talk about a movie that screams for a sequel.
yeah.
Have Natalie Portman at her current age now, and you find out that Matilda has grown up in that
They,
world.
they could totally do that. Why haven't they done
Totally.
that? That would sell tickets. Yeah,
Oh, what?
I would see it, obviously.
I'd see it
in,
twice.
in
Yeah.
this world of like super late sequels, that one makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense why 30 years later you got this character.
Right.
She's a seasoned professional. Maybe she adopts some young boy, and the
Who
cycle
knows?
continues. You know?
Or you find out that he had a son that shows up, and there's so many things it could be. I just feel like that movie really screams
No,
for a
yeah,
sequel. So
that's an amazing movie and
thank
an
you.
amazing scene.
I
I mean,
I
even
appreciate.
down to the fact that they show him doing sit-ups specifically throughout the whole
Uh-huh.
movie. And then at the end, in that battle, he's hanging upside down from the pipes, using his core strength to get himself out of the line of fire. They set it up. You don't even know, like, why is he just doing
No,
all the sit-ups? They're just showing him doing a fitness routine, but sit-ups specifically. And then
right.
he's doing these inverted hanging upside down sit-ups later on to kill people.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
great.
over the top,
Wow.
but amazing.
Well, I'm so glad that you liked it, and you
Yeah.
again, best to
I just felt like I
Leon.
couldn't go on the list because I already used it on my kid. So like too self-serving.
I'll share it with you.
Absolutely.
But I would like to know what's up next on
All
your
right.
number three.
So the number three is something that has to be on the list,
Okay.
but I also got to cheat just a,
Oh,
just a bit. And the reason I have to cheat is that I would say that the average person probably doesn't know or realize or recall that these things are actually all from different movies in the same series. They probably think they're from the
ah,
same series. But so number three, Dirty Harry.
okay.
Now, the cheating is that I'm going to call it Dirty Harry plus adding in some other scenes from other Dirty Harry movies
And that's fine.
that
All
I
what, five of
honestly,
them?
yeah, there's five. Until I went back and did the research for this, I would have swore that Go Ahead and Make My Day was in the first movie. It's the
Hmm.
fourth movie
Yeah.
that he says this. So I got a lot to say about this one. I mean, this has always been kind of a gun nerds movie in many ways. And apparently, the screenwriter himself, John Milius, was, he's like a huge gun nerd himself. He also wrote Red Dawn, which is another
Ooh.
movie that I didn't include. But if there was a third honorable mention, it might have Red Dawn on it because obviously
Yeah.
Red Dawn was great. Um,
Wolverines.
yeah, you can't hate on Red Dawn. But so the reason that this is on the list, aside from being a great movie in its own right, but back to my theme of impacting the gun culture is
Ah,
this
sudden
one
impact
movie.
on the gun
Yeah,
culture.
yeah, exact sudden impact. That's number four, right? But but the 44 Magnum was like a niche gun. And nobody really knew about nor cared about this gun until this movie came out.
Yeah.
Now, you've got okay, for the sake of the list, the gun battle itself is going to be the opening scene of the first Dirty Harry movie, where
Uh-huh.
he's sitting in the cafe having his coffee or whatever, and the bank robbery or the robbery's going on across the street, and he walks out in true Clint Eastwood aesthetic, cool as a cucumber, and then just standing like stock still, just shooting these guys with no fidgeting or hesitation at all,
Yeah.
which, yeah,
With that
okay.
sound.
Yeah. So first things first, I don't know. I'll probably get into this more than once, but Eastwood has this vibe in his movies that you will see again in the amazing Unforgiven,
Hmm.
uh, where he even explains it in that movie, where he's like, if you want to win a gunfight, you got to stand still, stay calm, and take aim and not miss. And that sounds really great, that the calm guy wins. And in all the movies, he's standing calm, he's got the gun pointed, and everybody's missing and he's hitting because
Yeah.
everybody else is panicking. But as a firearm instructor, don't stay still in a gunfight. Just the chances of somebody getting lucky shooting in your general direction, if you're just standing stock still, it's terrible advice. It's awesome for movies. You
Yeah.
see Clint Eastwood, maybe he just didn't like running around, in these films, but he's always just standing stock still, just, one shot per bad guy, no problem. It's definitely going to hit. They're definitely going to go down. They're definitely not going to be able to fire back while wounded, whatever. So he's obviously doing this in the movie. And then, of course, you have in that early scene, one of the first scenes in the whole franchise is just, do you feel lucky?
Yeah.
Well, do you? It's punk. And that is iconic. So this was, like I said, a niche firearm at the time. And despite his statement that this is the most powerful pistol in the world, it can blow your head clean off. Despite that, there were custom handguns that were more powerful than that at the time. And shortly after, and I'm going to talk about this later, shortly after the movie, really, it was no longer the most powerful, but you can argue it was the most powerful production handgun at the time.
Okay.
But it was a production handgun. But again, it was not, I want to say like 1954 is when the cartridge was formally developed. After this guy, Elmer Keith, who's famous in gun circles, blew up a whole bunch of guns trying to see how far he could push 44 Special. He made the 44 Magnum. And, but anyway, they wanted originally to use a different version of the gun. They wanted to use a nickel-plated 4-inch barrel version. They
Uh-huh.
ultimately went with the iconic 6.5-inch barrel blued one because they couldn't get the nickel one because the gun was uncommon enough that they just couldn't get their hands on one, but they could get the
Really?
other configuration. So they went with it. And I think they made the right choice because even though it is impractically large to
Hmm.
actually carry around under your San Francisco detective suit jacket, it definitely stands out in the movie way
Yeah.
more. So again, this movie made sales of this firearm skyrocket,
Right.
made the 44 Magnum an iconic
Household name.
cartridge, which until then was just like maybe a handgun hunter's sort of niche thing.
Hmm.
And but again, gotta cheat because again, Sudden Impact is the movie where he says, "Go ahead and make my day." But it's also the same movie where it begins with a very similar scene. Some guys are robbing the cafe that he's in, having his coffee. And of course, cool as a cucumber. If you stay cool, nobody will ever shoot you back. He just says this cool line is like, "We'll have to stop you," or something along these lines. And they say, "Who's we?" He's like, "Smith and Wesson and me," while he slowly reaches in, pretending like they don't see him 100% telegraphing his
Yeah.
moves, and pulls out his enormous gun while they've already got the drop on him and manages to shoot all of them in one shot. Everything's great.
Yeah.
But it's like, don't try that. If you're
No.
trying to defend yourself, don't try coming up with a cool one-liner while reaching into your coat as if that's not suspicious and thinking they're not going to immediately shoot you in the face. So don't
Yeah.
listen to Clint Eastwood's advice on armed self-defense.
Enjoy his
Uh,
movies.
I love the movies. I will always love the movies, but
Don't listen to
It's
that voice.
my due diligence. Please move. Please don't stand still. Yeah, please don't just slowly reach into your coat pretending like they're gonna not be paying attention to that,
Yeah.
despite how cool you are having your far bigger than normal gun. Though the last point I'm gonna make about that in the second movie, Magnum Force, he actually admits in some scene that he uses uh, light loads. He doesn't use full power magnums.
Oh,
He uses a special light hand load, which I won't get into too much into the details. There's 44 Special, which is a different cartridge altogether, which is weaker than 44 Magnum. And there are also lower recoil 44 Magnum loads.
yeah.
And when these guns were being touted for law enforcement, there were specifically lower recoil Magnum loads that were used in this and other cartridges when revolvers ruled the roost in law enforcement. But so the point being, all of his talk about the most powerful pistol in the world, and the whole time he's not even using particularly powerful loads in it because it's an absurd amount of power to use as a defensive firearm. Again, it was originally developed for hunting. It's just it's overkill. You're not really
Yeah.
getting any extra bang for your buck. All that extra energy is just going in one end and out the other end of the guy.
Right.
Probably hitting bystanders. So yeah, but
And he
still
didn't spill his coffee.
despite all of that, I gotta give it to that because that might be one of the most iconic firearm moments, much less gunfights in all movies. Even though it's five movies, which each one may have an iconic line that have kind of been consolidated in the popular consciousness into a single movie.
Yeah.
Uh, but it made my day.
Yeah.
So
The diner scene that you're talking about, that was on my short list. And for
yeah,
many reasons. One of the reasons was the way that the waitress dumped all of the sugar into his coffee.
yes.
But just as cool as whatnot. And then, like you said, he turns around and he comes up through the back door. But now, if I'm not mistaken, that's the movie where he said, "Now, did I fire 5 shots or did I fire six
No,
shots?"
that's sudden impact. The one with the
Oh, okay.
coffee and the waitress and the sugar. That is when he's like, make my day, and
Okay.
Smith and Wesson and me. But Do You Feel Lucky is the first movie where he shoots the guy from across the street and goes up. He's like, in all that confusion, I don't remember if I fired 5 shots or six. So you got to ask yourself one question: Do you feel lucky? And
Do
it's
you
just
have
like,
fun?
and then he's like, I got to know. And then he just pulls the trigger. Come on, man.
Oh, come
The
on.
point is, it sets the tone for what kind of guy this is. He's an
Yeah.
absolute mad lad. He's out of his mind. Yeah.
Right. And he did that character, that type of character in other movies as well.
Oh yeah.
With the
Absolutely.
Gauntlet, for example. Man, he
It's
was.
it's almost a meme. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, even down to like a much later movie, Bloodwork, where he's an old
Oh
guy
yeah,
basically, and he's yet again carrying a different Smith and Wesson revolver, which is not a very common one. It's a Model 627, 8-shot 357 Magnum, which anybody who knows anything about guns would know that it's a cool gun and not exactly a commonplace gun.
yeah,
Uh, you know, it's something I'm going to get in my collection one day, probably, if only because movie guns have
yeah.
I got to get more money so I can start buying more movie guns.
There you go. Well, awesome.
So yeah, so that's my number three. I'm sure yours is just as interesting.
Mine is from a more recent movie,
Okay.
and I will say that the gunplay comes in a lot on it, but also it's just friggin' cool. And I am talking about the epic Corey scene from 2012's Jack Reacher. So Jack Reacher is played by Tom Cruise, which okay, the series is wonderful. And yes, I know that he looks a lot more like Reacher does than Tom Cruise does. That being, that's not the point. He is trying to exonerate an ex-US Army sniper who supposedly went on a rampage and killed some people. So he goes through and he's searching and hunting for clues, and it eventually ends up at a shooting range who's owned by a USMC gunny sergeant, Cash, who is played by Robert Duvall. And in an effort to make sure to exonerate the gun owner, the gun club owner, he decides he's going to help. Well, along the way, they run into Werner Herzog's Zek Chelikov, who ends up being the bad guy who's behind all of it. And after they kidnap Rosamund Pike, the lovely Rosamund Pike, they hold her hostage at this quarry. It's night. There's going to be some rain. There's so many bad guys. And Reacher and Cash show up, and Reacher decides to drive a car backwards by remote control, which I thought was smart, but I didn't think you could do it that well. And Gunny has the high point, and he's taking out the lights and ends up trading some lead with Jai Courtney from Terminator Genesis. And in the end, there's some low tech sniping, there's some fierce hand to hand combat, and there are a lot of awesome shots. Um, I just it's the two movies are very fun for me. They have a 1970s cop detective feel to them in a modern generation. um, the way that he carries himself. He does move around, but he doesn't throw out lots of shots. Each one of his shots means something. And then he actually uses the weapon, even with spent ammunition, is able to use it as a weapon in hand to hand combat. So, was it realistic? I don't really know, but damn, it was cool.
You know, I'm gonna have to check that movie out because I gotta admit I haven't seen it.
Really?
I haven't
Wow.
seen it.
Have you read the books?
I have not. I know
Okay.
that it's like a series now too, based
Oh,
on the
yeah,
Jack Reacher books.
it is.
I've heard
I
good
would,
things about the series.
it's great.
All right,
But
so
one of
if
the
you had to
main
pick
things,
movie or
yeah,
series, which one would you start with?
I would go ahead and watch the series because there's only two. I mean, the movie because there's only two of them.
Okay, all right.
Okay. And then when you start the series, just kind of forget that that's the same. No, seriously, kind of like
Alternate
the same
reality
character.
version of the same guy,
Yeah,
yeah.
because it's just a Tom Cruise for anything that you want to say about him, he's a great actor. And I had no idea that Reacher was this huge guy and all of this stuff. I thought he played it very well. And again, there's some really awesome, cool scenes in it. Some things that don't make sense, but it goes to his character that he's playing. But yeah, I would tell you to watch that one. The second one has Kobe Smulders in it, um, and it's also really good. And they've already gone through two seasons of the on Amazon of the show, and the third season is going to be coming back. So, and both of the seasons are different, which is really cool because in the first one, he's kind of by himself. And on the second one, all of his investigators from his time in the military get involved. So, really great. You don't see it all coming together until the end. Just kind of had me on the edge of my seat lots of times. So, I would definitely tell you to give them a watch.
I'll check it out.
All right. Well, cool. Well, before you go and check it out, I think at this point we should take a little stop here and find out all about Everett and why you're a pacifist.
All right. Well, so as I alluded to earlier, by trade, I am an attorney, and I was admitted to the bar here in Louisiana in 2012. In 2016, I became a NRA and Louisiana State Police certified firearms instructor. And one of the reasons I did that was because I had, in my own personal training and my, constant connection with the, sort of local gun culture, just met so many people over the years who had their concealed handgun permits and everything, and had their 1 day class. And you can only learn so much in your 1 day class about the legal issues, and you can only really the instructors learn how to teach you how to shoot. Then they say, all right, go ahead and teach people the law too, with very little instruction on that. It's not actually required that you learn anything about the law to be an instructor, who are then required to talk about the law. So, having been a guy who had been into guns and shooting for a long time at that point, and having been an attorney, I was sick and tired of constantly trying to field questions about the legal issues, and then have maybe people wonder or doubt my credentials in the actual firearm issues, and vice versa. So I figured, you
Yeah.
know what, something I've always wanted to do. I'm going to become a certified firearms instructor. So I got my NRA pistol instructor certification, started teaching concealed handgun permit classes. and as a side hustle, for lack of a better term. Since then, I have given, legal seminars to other instructors to try to straighten people out. I've kind of become one of the local gurus if you need a question answered. I'm the vice president now for the last couple of years of the Louisiana Shooting Association. So we're responsible for a lot of the lobbying down to the state legislature on gun rights issues. So I'm down there all the time giving my testimony to the state legislative committees. And I'm also a program attorney with U.S. Law Shield, which is one of the self-defense insurance programs. So I do law seminars that are sponsored by them. So they're low to no cost for people to come and learn about the various legal issues about lawfully carrying a firearm, lawfully defending yourself within Louisiana law.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And so the PaciFist that's on your shirt.
Yeah, so PaciFist, that's what I call my training business, which is separate from my law practice. And the reason I decided to call it that, and it's something I think we'll probably talk about a little bit here in a minute, is that one of the things that you learn about when you start carrying a firearm every day, if you go to a decent instructor at least, and one of the common, I guess, themes that instructors talk about is conflict resolution and you win every fight that you don't get into in the first place.
Right.
And so one of the main themes that gets discussed is actually required in the curriculum for the Louisiana Concealed Handgun Permit training is conflict resolution. And the idea being is that the day you start carrying a firearm is the day you choose that you're going to lose every argument. That if you're out there in public and you are armed and somebody offends your person, somebody, parks in the wrong spot, somebody drives poorly, you got to let that go. You have to let the fact that you're carrying a firearm remind you at all times that every single encounter that you could find yourself in has the opportunity to become a deadly one.
Right.
And so I wanted to focus my training specifically on that mindset. And so that's why I decided to call it PaciFist. I can't resist the pun. So the idea of PaciFist is peace with preparation. You don't want to get into any type of conflict, but if you are forced into one despite your best efforts, you are able to fight your way out of it. So yeah, that's the idea of PaciFist firearms. Just reminding people that going about your day as a peaceful, responsible person is your number one calling if you're going to be armed.
Yeah. Yeah. And responsible gun ownership is so very important.
Absolutely.
In our culture today, we have way too many mass shootings, school shootings, and it just comes, I think the vast majority of them come from illegally stored, illegally purchased weapons that regular homeowners should be locking them up. What are
Yeah,
your thoughts?
if we can throw in a little bit of a public service announcement right here, one of the main things I can tell people, please, please stop leaving guns in your car. Don't do it. Stop leaving guns in your car overnight. The number one vector of stolen firearms is people busting into cars. I've heard specific examples. I was in federal court earlier this week talking to somebody about they were interviewing a guy who had done a bunch of burglaries and everything. And he had said, we decided we need to get a bunch of guns. How are we going to do it? We're just going to go around and look for cars with bumper stickers for gun bumper stickers, conservative bumper stickers, and just break into cars. And sure enough, we'd break into cars with the bumper stickers. We'd find guns in there, and so we kept doing it.
Wow.
And that is real. That's something that instructors have been saying for so long. Look, there are various lock boxes that you can purchase for your vehicle if you need to store a firearm in there in the short term. Let's say you are lawfully carrying and you arrive at a place that you cannot bring the firearm in and you're going to be outside of your car for a short period of time. Even that short period of time, you should lock it up, even if it's a relatively unsophisticated lockbox, just because your average vehicle burglary is extremely quick and it'll deter somebody with that small amount of time.
And the trunk isn't even safe anymore.
No, absolutely. And under no circumstances should you be leaving a firearm in your car by default overnight while it's parked in your driveway. There are more than enough people. Go on any sort of neighborhood Facebook or Nextdoor page, and you'll just see constant people talking about, oh, there's somebody coming down the street just trying door handles just to see if anybody forgot their car. And I know people, I'm not going to name names, but I know plenty of people who have had firearms stolen out of their vehicles.
Mm,
It absolutely happens. And if you leave a gun in your car long enough, it is
it
almost
will.
certain to happen to you. Do
Yeah.
not do it. There are many different safe ways to store firearms. They should not be in a vehicle unsecured at any point. Just don't do it,
Yeah.
because that's how people steal guns. And then, yeah, to your point about mass shootings, we just had one recently, an absolutely regrettable situation. A 15-year-old girl, I think, this time. And I don't think all the facts are out, but the question remains, how does this 15-year-old girl get her hand on this handgun that she used in this shooting?
Yeah.
Clearly, you've got some yet another situation where a parent trusts their child maybe too much and has a firearm that they're able to access.
Mhm.
Look, my kid's very young. He can't even walk on his own yet, and I still lock the gun up.
Yeah.
That I still lock the gun up. My gun is locked up right now. He cannot physically get out of his crib, but it's
Mhm.
still locked up. And why is that? Because I want to create the habit long before it is needed
Right.
that that gun is going to be secured. If it's not on my person in my holster, then it's going to be locked up,
Yeah.
period.
Just be
And
careful because he can shiv you.
yeah, oh yeah, of course. Well, you can't stop knives.
Yeah.
Anything pointy is a knife, honestly. But the point I'm getting at here in the theme of responsibility is there's really not too much responsibility. I always preach redundancy and safety. When you got your rules of gun safety, for example, your main two rules of gun safety is always keep the muzzle pointed in a safe direction and always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot.
Right.
You should always do both. And the reason you should always do both is that if, for whatever reason, one gets violated, the other one will kick in. If that firearm is not pointed in a safe direction, well, it's technically not going to hurt anybody if nobody pulls the trigger. And if the firearm is pointed in a safe direction or an unsafe direction, or if you pull the trigger and it's pointed in a safe direction, the gun may discharge, but it will not hurt anybody. So
Right.
you've got a redundancy in those types of safety rules for a reason. Same thing goes with safe storage. So it's critically important, I think, for anybody who has firearms in their house to teach their children about gun safety.
Yes.
But the problem that people run into is that they teach their children about gun safety. And they're like, I trust my kid, good kid, never do anything bad. Maybe, I just decided to keep it up in the top of the closet. He probably doesn't know it's there, probably. Then he wouldn't mess with it anyway. He's responsible. It's great if your kid's responsible, but also lock it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's
It's
not
also
on
just
your,
burglaries.
absolutely. Burglaries. Yeah. There are so many ways that firearms get into circulation in the hands of unsavory people. If somebody's stealing a gun, it's because they can't legally buy a gun because they're already a felon.
Yeah.
It's a serious, serious crime, serious felony to steal a firearm, state and federal law. So yeah, I can't preach safety enough. I don't think anyone can preach safety enough. At the point it becomes annoyingly ingrained in your mind, that's what we want. We want it to be like that earworm of a
Second nature.
song that you can't forget.
Hmm. And so if people want to find out more about PaciFist and the things that you do, where can they go?
So you can, I have a website, pacifist-firearms.com. You can look at my law practice at baudeanlawfirm.com. That's Baudean lawfirm.com. You can look at the Louisiana Shooting Association. There's just plenty of resources. I don't even want to say, hey, come to me, look at my stuff. There are plenty of resources out there. If you want to learn more, there are people out there who want to teach you. You can find low to no cost trainings. There's really no excuse not to do it.
And we're going to have all of those links at the end of the show and in the show notes. And I will tell people to search you out and find you,
Thanks.
to send it your way, because you deserve it. Well, all right. So I think if we've got enough of that out of the way, that it is now time for our penultimate choices.
Nobody says penultimate.
Oh,
I'm excited about these last two, especially
all
number
right.
two here.
Well, give me number two then.
All right, so number two is a scene from what is probably my favorite movie, period, which is one reason it's on the list, but that's why it's not number one. It's a scene from my favorite movie, but it's not my favorite gun battle in a movie,
Okay.
but it's the final three-way showdown in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Ugly.
This this is my favorite movie because it's awesome. Every
Yes.
time I watch this movie, I'm like, this movie is so good. How does this movie so good? I don't even know. So first of all, you got Clint Eastwood again. I realized in doing this list, he's on here twice.
Or 6 times if you think about it.
That's true if you got the five Dirty Harry films. But so, but this is, I mean, this has to be his magnum opus, right?
See what you did there.
Yeah, but even though there's no 44 Magnum, I guess Dirty Harry's is 44 Magnum opus, and this is his, cap and ball black powder revolver opus, I guess. But point being, amazing movie. This scene follows up probably the best piece of music in the soundtrack, The Ecstasy of Gold. That is such an amazing piece. I don't know. The main theme is probably slightly more iconic, but that's definitely the second most iconic and probably single best piece of music in the film. But this is also your sort of classic movie three-way standoff, which has in itself its own bit of the soundtrack, which really stands on its own. I think the track's called The Trio. But why I really wanted to talk about this, because I think this segues into our previous conversation just a little bit, is that this employs, I guess, a trope of the spaghetti Western genre, which I really appreciate. And it's the slow burn, longer than you expect it to be buildup to the very, very, very short gunfight, right? This gunfight is like a shot.
Yeah.
The whole gunfight.
I was going to bring that up, but I want you to talk.
But you go through this series of ever closening close-ups of the different characters, looking around, looking nervous, and this shot with this great music in the background goes on forever, it feels like. And I think that's a really good thing because I think it focuses on the element of time, not just the timing and how quickly things go in any sort of gunfight, but the time that not only have you spent with this movie, but everything comes down to this. Hollywood cheapens gun violence in a lot of ways because the good guys are running around pow, 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 killing the bad guys. But you think, I always find myself thinking, that bad guy who just got killed, he's a random nameless bad guy, but that's like I don't know, 35-year-old guy.
Yeah.
That guy is made of 35 years of time, maybe bad decisions that brought him to this point. But that's a guy who was born, raised, was a baby, went to school, had parents, got all the way to this point. Sure, he's just a random bad guy now, but if a 35-year-old random bad guy is snuffed out by a single gunshot, that's 35 years of making a human being.
Yeah.
Just instantly snuffed out. So I dwell on that a lot. I'm a 38-year-old person. Obviously, I never, ever, ever want to be in a gun violence situation. And the main reason, again, back to my pacifist theme, main reason I want to be able to defend myself is to try to avoid that situation where the 38 years of time I've put into my existence gets snuffed out by some random act of violence.
Yeah.
But that's what I appreciate about these spaghetti Western scenes is that I feel like it brings back into focus that despite it being a single gunshot that ends this, you have that brief but still overly long moment of buildup to this one shot, which I think finally brings back into focus how significant that one shot is. Not only does it end the movie, but in this case, it ends Lee Van Cleef, not a young guy. He may have been a bad guy for most of his life, but this whole long movie, this whole buildup for that single shot, and Tuco's over there with his unloaded gun, unable to shoot back. But I think that makes it extra powerful, brings back into focus how significant it is that these characters are literally shooting at each other, that someone is dying in this moment. And we like to look at it and say, that's awesome. That's an iconic scene. And it is. But I think that is a really powerful trope in the spaghetti Westerns with like a sub honorable mention to the beginning sequence of Once Upon a Time in the West, which is another Sergio Leone film, I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, um, starring Charles Bronson, who is going to be mentioned in the near future. But there's like, it's been a long time since I've watched that movie. I feel like there's 20 minutes. It's not that long, but it feels like 20 minutes of guys standing around
Yeah.
waiting for Charles Bronson's character to arrive, just building tension. They're just sitting there, swatting flies on themselves and stuff like
Yeah.
this. Then he gets there, he gets off the train, he sees him, they stand there, and then bam, 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 he kills all three of them. And you're like, what the? I just sat here. Who are these guys? They're not important to the movie. They, you spend
I
all this
invested so
time,
much into
you
them.
spend all this time watching these guys sit there, and then that's it for them. And for me, that's like a powerful thing that you can do in a movie to the best of your ability in a movie's timeline. And so I really do like that trope. So I think that this movie, not just being one of my favorite films of all time, if probably my favorite film of all time, but it brings everything back into focus that these things, whether or not you're talking about John Wick of being a 2 hour long gunfight where people were just getting shot left and right, that just really, as exciting as it is, cheapens the gravity of what we're actually dealing with in these movies. And I think bringing it back into focus, the seriousness of the topic is kind of important.
Yeah.
Caveat: my number one pick is not in that vein. It's back to ridiculous. So that's my number four. I'm eager to hear. Or my number two. Now it's the fourth one I've done, but it's my number two.
Yeah.
So I'm eager to
Or
hear.
your two and my two together would make a four.
All right.
Yeah. Well, the number two, my penultimate choice, is the train station battle from 1987's The Untouchables. This movie, you talk to so many people, so many guys, and this is one of their absolute favorite movies. And this scene is one of the many scenes, but one of the most remembered and talked about scenes. And in the movie, Kevin Costner's Elliot Ness is on a mission to bring down Al Capone and his ruthless Chicago mobsters terrorizing the town. He goes through what, 7 or 8 guys to help him turn everything around. And with the help of a dying Sean Connery's Jimmy Malone, they are finally able to track down what is going to be the key to bringing Capone down. That's Walter Payne, his accountant. So as they're waiting for Payne's arrival at Union Station, tension is really, really high. Suddenly, amidst the chaos, Ness sees a woman pushing a baby carriage and trying to struggle with some suitcases. So after finally deciding, he keeps going back and he keeps looking at the clock, and he goes back and looks at her, and goes back and looks at the clock. He thinks he has enough time. So he goes down there and he grabs the front of it and he gets all the way up to the top of the stairs, constantly looking at everybody. He's got his back to the door. The mom is thanking him when suddenly Payne and the mobsters guards show up. Despite being outnumbered, Ness and George Stone, who's played by Andy Garcia, are able to bring down the bad guys, capture Payne, and in all of the brouhaha, he has to let go of the baby carriage that is constantly just going back down the marble steps. And he's torn between, I need to catch this, but I need to get this guy. I need to catch this, get this guy. And in the end, they're able to save the little kid and get Payne. Now, that scene in its own is just really amazing. The way that they slow it down. You've got a couple of seamen that are in the shots that are getting hit, and you've got different angles. Totally outnumbered, but he's a great shot. But the best thing is, or I think the favorite part has got to be, and I totally forgot this until I rewatched it again last night, is at the very end, Garcia has slid down and caught the carriage, and he's on his back and he's holding his gun up, pointing it at the enforcer who has the accountant at gunpoint right up to his neck. And Costner finally just takes his gun and he puts it down and he's like, "You got him?" And he's like, Garcia's just sitting there with that revolver and he's, "Take him," and pow. And you don't see anything until he starts to slide down and you could see what's on the back wall next to him. So you knew that he had that one incredible shot, and they're able to save everybody, well, except a few Marines, and save the day. So I really have always enjoyed this. I actually remember seeing this movie in the theater, which was a lot of fun, and I've watched it so many times since then. Um, but that's going to be my number two.
A good pick. Yeah, it's been far too long since I've seen that movie. I've seen it. It's been a long time. It reminds me a bit of one of the picks that did not make it on my list, which was Tombstone.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
Despite how amazing Tombstone is as a movie, I wouldn't say that any of the gunfights stood out to me. Really, the dialogue is what made that movie good. But the
uh-huh.
reason it reminds me of that is because these are both based on true stories of true lawmen.
True.
Elliot Ness and Wyatt Earp, who we make these movies where we can really lionize the lawmen who took down these bad guys, and then but sometimes when you look at the history of it, it's like, you know, maybe it wasn't quite so clear cut.
Yeah.
Elliot Ness was
Maybe
like
he didn't do that. He did it. Yeah, but it's
well, like
cooler when
Elliot
he
Ness was like
does.
a prohibition cop, and it's like, so like we're gonna sit here and make sure alcohol stays illegal and make sure we get this guy for tax evasion. It's like, okay, well, that can be a little bit less motivated,
Yeah.
about crimes in the same sense that Wyatt Earp was famous in a lot of ways for keeping people from carrying guns in the towns that he was a sheriff of, and it's like, but he's the guy who's famous for carrying guns and being the sheriff. So it seems a little bit like, all right, so good for the goose, but not the gander. Nah. And so,
Are you
yeah,
saying Wyatt Earp was a hypocrite?
a
Come
little,
on.
look, I'm a Doc Holliday guy. Let's be honest. I mean, that movie, again, we got Val Kilmer. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, honestly, this is the best part of Tombstone is Doc Holliday.
I rewatched that final scene shootout again because it was on my short list.
Yeah, and that's a real life character. It's just like he was a dentist and then just decided he was going to go west and become a gunfighter, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just like, all right, I feel like we've lost something in the world that there isn't a frontier where you could just be like, you know what, dentistry isn't doing it for me anymore. I'm just going to be an adventurer and just do some
Yeah.
crazy stuff.
There you go.
Why not? We don't have that frontier. Maybe when we got space, and then we'll have to put back lasers into
Go
this
to
list.
Mars. Yeah.
We didn't consider laser
Laser shot.
guns. No sci-fi stuff in this list, but yeah, but good number two pick though. Makes
Well,
me want
thank
to watch
you.
the movie again.
Well, thank you. Well, I am so ready to hear what your absolute favorite is,
Okay.
but I want to make a guess that
All
it
right.
is not Nicolas Cage in Face Off
It is not Nicolas Cage.
with his gold-plated guns and
No,
his crazy eyes.
yeah, no offense to Nicolas Cage, but I don't think there was a single Nicolas Cage movie that was considered for my list, unfortunately, to Mr. Cage. Um, so my number one, I alluded to it a little bit with my mention of Charles Bronson earlier. My number one, this is a very personal number one for many reasons. Uh, I can't say it's a good movie.
Oh,
It's not winning any awards, but it's
yeah.
a movie that's near and dear to my heart because we're going to go back to the beginning and go back to the ridiculous, over the top world of movie gunfights that are completely unrealistic, back to Desperado, etc. And I'm going to try to tie this one in to every other pick on the list in some way. So my number one pick is Death Wish 3.
With Marina Sirtis.
Yes, 1985. Probably not the best Death Wish film. If you had to give it to one, obviously Death Wish 1 has a much more serious tone. It's more of a movie. Death Wish 3 is just absolute, fantasy, revenge vigilante movie, completely over the top. It is utter insanity, much like Desperado is utter insanity. You know, you gotta love Charles Bronson.
Oh man.
He's starting to get old in this movie. As bad of a dude as he is, he's starting to get old in this movie, and he's starting to look it, but he's still pulling it off.
Yeah.
And so to go back through my list again, like I said, I'm gonna tie this into the rest of them. So
Okay. Wait.
I love this movie. The first time I saw this movie, I was sitting there in college watching whatever came on TV, and this movie came on. I'd never seen this movie at the time, 20 years ago. And I'm like, this is nuts. How have I never heard of this movie? As the guy who I am, who likes the type of movies I like. And so ever since I saw it just randomly on AMC, I think I've
It
just,
was number one. that you saw the first, or you saw 3?
No, I saw 3 first.
Wow.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm sitting there watching TV with my college roommate. We both liked action movies. Like, I never seen this movie, but we just put it on. It's just like crazy stuff is happening the entire time. All right. So the reason this one ties in, outside of my own personal love for this movie, the specific scene is the final shootout scene, which is the culmination of everything in the movie. It's an absurd movie. Basic premise here is that we're 3 death wishes into the series now. The main character, Paul Kersey, his family gets killed by gangsters, random street crime. In the first movie, he becomes a vigilante. Second movie, he is now like a vigilante as his career, I guess. And he's just going around different cities and fighting crime, Batman style, but with murder. So by Death Wish 3, he's now a well-known guy who's just going around vigilanting, I guess. So he goes back to New York where the series begins, and he goes to visit his old army buddy from the Korean War. And like when he gets there to visit him, his buddy has been just killed by the gangsters that have taken over the neighborhood. And so like he watches him die in his arms, etc. So of course, he decides he's going to kill every bad guy. And that's just the movie from there on out is him killing every bad guy. Okay.
Yeah.
But so it is a crazy movie. But to tie it into Desperado, my number 5, in that barroom scene in Desperado, when Antonio Banderas first opens up that guitar case, one of the guns in there is the iconic gun from Death Wish 3, which is the 475 Wilde Magnum, which is an obscure gun then, an obscure gun now. It's a Super Magnum semi-automatic pistol, adjustable gas system for like fine-tuning it to the specific over-the-top power load that you're shooting. In Death Wish 3, Charles Bronson like special orders this to extra super kill the bad guys, and it gets delivered to him, and he tells everybody in the movie like, oh, when my friend Wilde gets here, we're going to take care of these guys. And then he's like, Wilde's here, and Wilde is the gun, the 475 Wilde Magnum. And so once you know what it looks like, you're going to see it and stuff, and it's unmistakable. But so I'm going to get back to this in a minute, but that's the tie-in to Desperado. 1, the utter insanity of the gunfights, and 2, that specific pistol, which is in his gun case. And I think in Desperado, one of the random bad guys is carrying one, which, again, insane. So to go back to Predator, that ended up being a relatively influential gun pick for the movie because, again, you see it in later movies, even though there's absolutely no reason for that being in there. So it ties into Predator because it's a specific to that film ridiculous gun, like the man-portable minigun that got put in the movie and then became, at least to an extent, a movie staple. So it's going to tie into Dirty Harry, because there is a specific line in Death Wish 3 this movie is 14 years later, and they specifically one-up it because he gets his Wilde Magnum, and one character says, is that like a 44 Magnum? And then Charles Bronson's like, no, the 475 Wilde Magnum is a modified big game cartridge or something crazy like this. Just so you know, this gun is way more than Dirty Harry's gun, like way more. Just letting you know, viewer.
Just saying.
Now, the bit of lore here is that this gun was in Charles Bronson's personal collection. So he gets put on the movie and he suggests, hey, you know what would be cool? If this ridiculously overpowered huge gun is the iconic gun of this movie. And they're like, okay, we're going to go with that. We're just going to one-up the whole Dirty Harry series here. And so literally Charles Bronson had this ridiculous gun and it's like, let's put this gun in the movie. And they're like, here, let's go with that. So, but to further tie it into Dirty Harry, I'm sitting here watching this movie again and watching this final scene specifically, and you see that exact same 70s to 80s cool guy hero tactic where I'm going to stand absolutely still with no cover and just aim at the bad guys and shoot them, and the power of my Super Magnum gun is going to win the day. They're going to shoot at me left and right, never hit me.
Not going to hit me.
I'm going to take my sweet time standing in the dead open and aim, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be totally fine because I'm the hero and I can keep my cool, right? Now, this is after he grabs a military bring home Browning 1919 machine gun, belt fed, and has like one of his, other guys from his apartment complex holding the belt of ammunition while he's just mowing down bad guys in the street for like 10 straight minutes in the movie. It's completely absurd.
Nuts.
But then to tie it into my number two pick, the end of this movie. The end of this movie is uh, still a sort of three-way situation. The main gangster shows up. He's out of ammunition for his wielding Magnum. He's out of ammunition for his machine gun, which again ties back to needing to reload, like in John Wick and everything.
Yeah.
And the bad guy, they shoot him. He shows up in the apartment, they shoot him, but turns out he's wearing a bulletproof vest. So they think it's all over. And then he stands back up and he's got Charles Bronson and the detective that he was teaming up with, and he's got them both dead to rights. And he points his gun at the detective for a second. Charles Bronson, from the corner of the apartment, picks up a literal rocket launcher that he happened to have stowed there.
Okay, I thought that was this movie.
Yeah. He had like mail ordered it earlier in the movie. He just picks up this rocket launcher and just point blank shoots this guy with a rocket launcher and blows him out the window. He's a smoking corpse. Somehow, despite shooting the rocket at point blank range in the room, it doesn't kill all of them, even though by all rights, it probably should have killed all of those guys. But yeah, it's such a ridiculous, over-the-top movie that is a culmination, in my opinion, of everything that was the movie gun culture at the time in the 70s and 80s, with the deification of super Magnum pistols making you unstoppable, and just the tough guy tactics and the one-upsmanship of over-the-top stuff. But then also you've got, again, kind of that random prop department situation of the various guns that show up. You even got a guy, all the people who live in the neighborhood that's been taken over by the gangs, they all kind of pull out whatever random personal firearms they have to fight back in the end. One dude's even got like a pipe shotgun, a zip gun, just two pieces of just slammed together. And interestingly enough, in my personal collection, I somehow ended up with a production pipe shotgun like that, because one guy who had spent some time in the Philippines in World War II and saw these things used in action thought, if we made something like this as an ultra cheap gun, it might sell. Spoiler, it did not. But some of them were made. They're not worth a lot of money. But a client of mine was trying to get rid of guns, and they're like, how do I get rid of guns legally? And I said, well, you can give them to me. I'll take them. And so one of them was this Richardson R5 Philippine guerrilla gun. It's absurd. I shot it one time, but it's literally the fanciest version of two pieces of pipe that you slam together. It's completely
crazy. I think I remember that.
Yeah. No, it's a stupid movie. It's not winning any awards, but it's got a special place in my heart, and it is just completely again that culmination of everything silly but cool in movie gunfights. Yeah.
So I can further tie that in to the Death Wish to Dirty Harry.
All right.
Because in the first Dirty Harry movie, the bad guy is an actor who was in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Marina Sirtis, who plays Counselor Troy in Star Trek The Next Generation, plays a girl in Death Wish 3 called Maria. Very small part.
Yeah, but that's the zip gun guy's wife, I think. She gets
murdered
by the bad guys. Yeah, she gets murdered by the bad guys, I think, and they can't save her. Yeah, no, it's
that's her.
Yeah, well, that's crazy.
Another tie. Man, that's awesome.
Yeah,
you really brought it.
Yeah. If anyone hasn't seen that movie, I can't say you're going to be wowed, but you're going to be like, wow, that was a movie.
Yeah. Especially when the rocket launcher at the end. It's what?
And in Death Wish 4, he shoots the guy with a grenade launcher at point blank range too. It's like they couldn't figure out what to do. And Death Wish 5 kind of rolls it back a little bit. I thought they probably shouldn't have come up with the Death Wish 5 because they had to roll it back a little bit, because what else are they going to do?
Yeah. So did you happen to see the Bruce Willis remake?
Bruce Willis? I thought there was a Kevin Bacon one, wasn't there, like called Death Sentence or something?
No, there's actually a remake called Death Wish.
Oh yeah, I don't know if
Bruce Willis.
I cannot remember. I might have seen it. It might have made that little of an impression on me.
Yeah.
Or I didn't see it.
I enjoyed it for what it was.
I
There
might
were
check
some
it.
over the top guns in it as well, but he's got that classic part at the end where he points toward the camera.
Yeah.
So,
It's funny, just to go back to a little bit of Death Wish. Death Wish seemed to be like a launching off point for a lot of actors. Death Wish 1, the random gangster that like kills his family is Jeff Goldblum.
really?
Yeah. And then in Death Wish 2, one of the random gangsters that he kills is Lawrence Fishburne. Like they don't
Wow.
have names in the movies. But
Yeah.
like I'm watching these movies, it's like 2005, and I'm watching these movies for the first time. I'm like, hey, that's that guy.
Ah,
That's Lawrence Fishburne. That's Jeff Goldblum. He's just being an awful guy with no name in this. Just,
yeah.
but
Well, uh, blowing through the IMDb while you were talking, the guy who plays the other Wild Stallion from Bill and Ted, so it's Bill S. Prescott. He's a
Not Keanu Reeves is one of the random mooks in Death Wish 3. Yeah.
yeah,
He
yeah,
gets
and he's
killed by Charles Bronson.
yeah. So there, and hey, that's a pretty good ending, you know.
Yeah, yeah. No, wait, I think he gets killed by the detective who saves Charles Bronson's life at the last second.
Oh, Ed Lautner.
Yeah, I was watching this scene earlier today just to make sure that it was as crazy as I remembered it being. And
And it
it,
was.
it totally is. Yeah, totally. I think actually when he gets killed, the shotgun he was holding in the scene before is magically changed to a different model of shotgun.
It's amazing. Those Transformers are just, they
It
were
just
so
happened.
hot there in the
Dangerous,
80s.
ghost guns, I guess. But
Well, awesome. Well, you have tidied that up very nicely,
all
but
right,
I am ready to lay my absolute favorite.
all right,
And it was an easy, easy choice. When you came to me with this idea, I instantly knew what my number one was going to be, and it never wavered at
all
all.
right, all right.
And I am talking about the Somerset Village Showdown in 2007's Hot Fuzz. So you've seen this movie, huh?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So
That
the
is such a
whole
fun movie.
it's such a fun movie, and the whole movie. So you've got so this is an Edgar Wright movie. This is the second in the three movie trilogy with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. So in this one, Simon Pegg is Nicholas Angel, a police sergeant who is too exceptional in London and gets sent to the rural town of Sanford in Gloucester. Um, Lots of interesting characters. It supposedly has the lowest crime in any city or any town in England.
Mhm.
And eventually he uncovers the fact that the Neighborhood Watch Alliance um, is killing all of the undesirables to
The Greater
gain
Good.
those lowers. Yeah, so it's really cool. So he and his new bestie, um, Police Constable Danny Butterman, have to get together to stop them. But leading up to this movie, I mean, leading up to this scene, is Danny's love for all cop movies. He loves Bad Boys 2. He likes Point Break. You know, he's got that famous line where he's like, have you ever just like taken your gun and shot up in the air and going, ah? All of which those things are, like you were talking about earlier, they're little seeds, they're little nuggets that come back later on
Yeah.
to replay.
It's just
So
like it's a love letter to other movies
it
movie.
is. Oh my God. So when Danny and excuse me, when Danny and Nicholas finally have to come back into town, all of the NWA members come out and they're all weaponized. And I'm not talking about, you know, mobsters or this is the shop owners, the town doctor, even the town's reverend is armed up and tries to shoot and kill them. They pour out of every nook and cranny. But luckily, they've got all of the guns that have been confiscated. So, in a hell of lead and music, it is definitely a scene worth watching and rewatching.
That is another movie that I loved so much, and I need to give it a rewatch because it's been so many years, and I just know there's so many iconic scenes, like maybe like kick an old lady in the face, and there's like one point where the a steeple from the church just falls on a guy and lands on him, but it doesn't just crush him immediately, like he's sort of standing there
Oh,
like
that
this,
guy.
like
Yes, yes, yes.
completely broken in half from
And
just
then later at the end of the film, when there's the small town this like miniaturized. The lead bad guy falls in it and it comes up through this, and it's James Bond, Pierce Brosnan.
Wow.
So so many things about that movie just jump out. And like when Danny asks him, "Have you ever seen what's it called, Bad Boys?" And he's like, "No." "Have you ever seen Bad Boys 2?" "No." "Okay, so which are we watching?" "Oh, show you some hot Point Break and Bad Boys." And he's like, "Which one?" And he's like, "Well, which one should we watch?" He's, "No, both of them. Which one's first?" So it's so much fun. And um again, I'll say it is not the most believable guns, and neither
But
of us really went for that,
no, no,
you
no,
know.
no. I mean,
But the
I
way
feel like I got my realism out of the way in the honorable mentions for a reason. I didn't feel like I didn't want to be hamstrung by realism
uh-huh.
for this. This is a movie gunfights list, so I went into movie gunfights,
Yeah,
not gunfights in a movie that would otherwise be somewhat realistic, but just this peak Hollywood type of aesthetic with the
yeah,
gunfight.
yeah.
And I think
I,
we both kind of went there.
I will tell you, one of the movies I almost snuck it in is a Sean Connery film called Outland.
I think
Um,
that's
yeah, it basically is High Noon on the moon of Jupiter.
High
Okay.
Noon is a great movie.
Yes.
Another one of those I've only seen once, but I was just like, man, this is a really good movie.
So find this movie and watch it. And the reason it almost made it is because even though it's in the future,
Mhm.
all they use are conventional weapons,
Okay.
shotguns, stuff like that. And there's this really cool scene where they're outside of it's on a moon, but they're outside of the station and they're shooting at each other, and they actually take into the physics of it that the recoil will actually push them back, and they
That's
have
it.
to. And besides that, Connery is just amazing in this movie. Um, uh, Peter Boyle is in it. Um, what's her name? Frances Steenburgen is in it, playing the crabby old doctor, and it is just it's so much of a high noon, and it's really cool movie. I love it, and I've watched it many times.
I'm just glad you
Um,
didn't say, in the theme of Sean Connery and guns, I'm glad you didn't say Zardoz, because that's
oh
probably
my God,
like I sat like my friends and I back in law school had a bad movie night and we tried to watch that. I don't even know like we technically it played the whole time, but I couldn't tell you what happened in that movie because we just got so distracted by how boring it was that we started talking about
I
other
thought you
stuff.
thought you were going to say you were distracted by his diaper and bandolero.
No, no, as iconic as his outfit is,
Yeah, yeah.
it's yeah, man.
Another one that never made it on the list but should have been discussed is Commando.
Oh, look, I
Yeah,
thought about Commando, but again, Commando is one of those movies where I remember the lines from the movie more so than the specific gunfights, you
yeah,
know? And yeah, of course, you got the iconic, like quad barrel rocket launcher situation that he's shooting and everything. But,
yeah,
that's what sticks out from the movie. Technically, I guess it's a gun, but I felt
yeah,
like that type of thing, like we talked about, getting rid of sci-fi, getting rid of war movies specifically, because it's like a separate genre,
yeah.
you know yeah, Commando's great, but I felt like I had to pick one Arnold movie. I couldn't go with a bunch of Arnold movies. I couldn't pick like Terminator or Terminator 2 because I mentioned it in conjunction with Predator,
Uh-huh.
So I got it in there a little bit, might be cheating, but
Nope, you got it in there. That's what
yeah.
counts. Wow. Well, folks, that concludes the countdown of our favorite gun battles in cinema. I'd like to thank Everett here for taking the time to compile this list. I know it was probably tough, and you really brought the research, man. I've got the way you had your strings pulled together and everything. Bravo.
I'm glad it
Bravo.
worked out. I'm glad it worked out.
And so I want to thank all of you out there for choosing to listen to Fave 5 from Fans. We are thrilled that you joined us and hope you had an amazing time. If you enjoyed the podcast, we would be incredibly grateful if you shared it with a friend and gave us a glowing 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, whatever that may be. Your support means the world to us, and it's a free way that you can help the Plastic Microphone Studios grow and thrive. And honestly, if this show wasn't your favorite and you didn't like it, I don't mind if you lie and still write a good review, because karmically, it'll come on me, not you. So, consider it. So you can connect with us on any of the social platforms like Twitter, Instagram, or X, or now Blue Sky. Um, Find us and help keep the conversation going and make our podcast community even more vibrant and exciting. Yay! Thank you for being a part of our journey. We can't wait to share more thrilling content with you in the future. Stay tuned for more Fave 5 from Fans adventures. New episodes come out. New episodes come out every Friday, unless they don't. So be sure to subscribe and follow us to catch all of the episodes. And remember, folks, it may not be the best, it may not be the most popular, but if it's your favorite, then it's good enough for us. Thanks for joining us. Everett, take us out.
All right, like I always say, everybody, peace be with you. Take it easy.
I like that.